The sterling silence, a love hidden in grief. Losing your husband is crushing. Discovering you're pregnant right after is life-altering. But escaping that double-edged grief by accepting a job to care for a reclusive millionaire's silent son. She had no idea she was stepping into a house where love was hidden, a maze of secrets only time and the heart could reveal. Don't forget to like this story, comment below, subscribe, and share it with anyone who loves a good tale of redemption and new beginnings. Now, let's dive in. The rain had finally eased, but the cemetery grounds were still soaked, as if the earth itself refused to accept the finality. Isabel's damp shoes sank slightly into the mud, yet she stood motionless. Everyone else had left, some in haste, others because they simply didn't know what to say. Only she remained. She and the still wet gravestone. Ethan Cole. Police officer. Beloved husband. 32 years old. The letters were fresh in the stone, but Izzy felt them carved inside her. She tried to take a deep breath, but the air wouldn't fill her lungs. Her chest felt heavy. It wasn't just physical, though her body screamed with exhaustion. It was another pain, a silent, vast agony that found no exit. When she finally managed a choked sob, it tasted salty, a mix of rain and unshed tears. Ethan died on a Tuesday. She could still hear the phone ringing, still recall the broken voice of the colleague who tried to explain what he barely understood himself. A sudden shootout, an attempted robbery, immediate reaction, too much valor for a cowardly world. She wasn't allowed to see the body. What arrived was the sealed casket and cold bureaucracy that felt like a mockery of her pain. Izzy forced herself through the days on autopilot, as if she'd swallowed an emotional anesthetic that didn't numb the pain, but kept her from screaming. Returning home alone was worse. Every corner of their apartment held a piece of Ethan, his uniform still hanging behind the bathroom door, his soap, the coffee pot he always forgot to turn off. She lacked the strength to change anything. The bed remained, one side intact, the other sunken by a warm absence that seemed to breathe at night. It was that weekend when she first threw up, 3 times. At first, she dismissed it as nerves or silent disgust. But when she realized her period was 2 weeks late, the thought hit her like lightning. She bought the test at a 24-hour pharmacy, hands trembling and eyes vacant. She sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the wall, waiting the longest 2 minutes of her life. And then she saw it. Positive. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just sat there, the test in her hands, a gaping hole in her chest. Pregnant. And a widow. The words made no sense together. On Monday, she returned to work. Her manager tried to convince her to take leave, but she refused. "If I stop, I'll break," was all she said. The hospital became the only place where the pain felt distant. Izzy was good at her job, an obstetrics nurse who had guided births for almost 8 years. She had seen women reborn as mothers. But now, walking the halls and hearing a newborn cry hurt her like an invisible blade. She smiled. She pretended. But inside, every cry reminded her that her child wouldn't have a father waiting at the door. One evening, on break, she sat staring at the cold, untouched rice in her lunch container, trying to convince herself she was strong. But her colleague, Maya, noticed. "You're not okay, Izzy. You don't have to pretend." "I'm not pretending, I don't know what okay is anymore." Maya, a woman of few words but sharp observation, didn't push. A few days later, however, she returned with a crumpled paper scrawled with a name and a number. It's a bit unusual, but it might be an escape. "A friend of mine works as a cook at a country estate upstate. The boss needs a nanny." "A nanny?" Izzy asked, raising tired eyes. His wife died. The son is 5. The house is huge, but it's like a mausoleum. The last nanny left without a word. Why? I'm a nurse, Maya. I don't know how to look after a kid like that. Yes, you do, Izzy. You always did, and now more than ever. Izzy tucked the paper away. That night, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, the empty side of the bed, and the box where she'd stored Ethan's last uniform shirt. The next day, she called. The man who answered had a dry voice. Yes, we're hiring. The estate is 2 hours from the city. I can send someone to pick you up. Are you sure? Sure. Goodbye. And he hung up. 2 days later, a black SUV was waiting outside the hospital. Izzy climbed in with a backpack on her shoulder, and no goodbyes. The drive was long, surrounded by trees that seemed to grow in silence. When the estate gate opened, she felt the weight of the place before she even stepped out. The house was enormous, but dark, as if it had forgotten its own light. The driver led her to the entrance. There, she saw him for the first time. Julian Sterling, tall, with an unkempt beard and impenetrable eyes. He didn't say hello or welcome. He only nodded and turned away. She followed him inside. The house was spotless but lifeless. Furniture seemed to be there out of obligation. There were paintings, but no faces. Vases, but no flowers. He pointed to her room. The boy's name is Liam. He's next door. He's quiet, not aggressive. Dinner is at 7. The house is yours, but I prefer silence. Is that clear? Perfectly. It was all she managed to say. That night, Izzy sat on the edge of the bed and touched her own belly. It was still too early to feel anything, but she knew. Inside her, a new life was trying to bloom, even in the midst of so much silence, so much absence, so much pain. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, just one more day, just one more step. And for the first time in weeks, she slept. Not because the pain had passed, but because she was finally far enough away to attempt a new beginning. She woke to the sound of wood creaking on the floor above. It was still dark, maybe 6 a.m. A cold, gray thread of light filtered through the window. It took Izzy a moment to remember where she was. The bed wasn't hers. The walls were thick, the antique furniture immobile, like sentinels guarding an untold history. Her hand went to her belly by instinct. The feeling of lightness was false. Inside, the world still weighed heavily. But she breathed. It was a new day. She went downstairs slowly, hearing hurried footsteps below. In the kitchen, she found the cook, a soft-spoken woman named Sophia, stirring something in an iron pot. "Good morning," Izzy said, hesitantly. Sophia turned with a weary smile. "Did you sleep well, dear?" "Enough." The answer was automatic. Enough was all she could promise for now. After a silent breakfast, Izzy went to the room next door. The door was ajar. Liam was sitting on the edge of the bed, hugging a stuffed dinosaur. His eyes were large and still, dark brown like Julian's, but without any spark. She entered softly, but he was already watching her. He said nothing. "Hi, Liam," she said, sitting on the floor to be at his level. "I'm Izzy, but you can call me whatever you like." The boy remained silent. She didn't push. For days, it was like that. Izzy spoke little. She drew pictures on the gallery table. She read children's books softly near the hallway, hoping he would listen. She baked cookies and left them out. She planted seeds in the garden and watered them, talking to them as if they were people. And slowly, very slowly, Liam began to stir. First, he appeared in the gallery. He sat far away, but he was there. Then, he touched the colored pencils on the table. The next week, he held out a drawing to her. A sun with eyes and a small figure below. "Is that you?" she asked. He nodded. "And this one?" "Next to you?" She pointed to a larger figure. Liam hesitated. Then he answered, in a thread of a voice. "Dad." Izzy didn't respond. She just smiled. It was the first word he had spoken since she arrived. Julian didn't comment. He only appeared at night, coming and going like a disciplined shadow. He managed the estate's administration, locked away in his study. He barely looked at Liam, not out of lack of love, but out of fear, as if he were afraid to touch something too fragile. Izzy noticed it. His absence weighed more than if he were truly far away. One night, Izzy found him in the library. He was facing away from her, staring at an endless bookshelf. "Liam drew you today." Julian turned slowly, his eyes guarded. "He said your name." There was a long pause. Julian took a deep breath. "Then it's a start. He just needs you to be present." "I don't know how to be." Izzy approached, unhurried. "He doesn't either. That's why you match. Two people who are trying, even if they don't know how." He looked at her for a moment longer, for the first time without looking away. "You always speak with such certainty." "I say out loud what I'm trying to believe inside." Julian looked away. "This house was dying. You brought life." Izzy shrugged, trying to hide a blush. "I just brought presence." That's what's always missing when grief arrives. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was a truce, a space where saying too much would hurt. In the days that followed, Izzy and Liam created small rituals. She prepared breakfast with him, let him choose the mug, and taught him how to fold the napkins. He started following her through the hallways, like someone seeking shade on a hot day. One morning, he appeared in her room with a paper in his hand. "It's for you, Aunt Izzy." It was a drawing. Izzy with a huge belly and a baby with blue hair. "Blue? Because she's going to be a magical girl." She laughed. "I think you're right." Julian watched from a distance, sometimes from the hallway, sometimes from the gallery. Izzy noticed and said nothing. Their conversations began to happen in lost moments, late at night in the kitchen, or in the reading room, where she looked for books for Liam. They talked about the weather, flowers, old movies, until one night, Izzy risked more. "You don't talk much about her." Julian had a glass of wine in his hand, his face in shadow. "Who?" "Your wife." He took a long time to answer. "Because speaking her brings her back, and when she comes back, it hurts more than when she left." Izzy didn't interrupt. He continued, like someone unearthing something buried. "She loved violets. She had a laugh that sounded like it would explode the world. She was light, too much light. I always thought the world wouldn't know how to hold her. And you?" "I didn't know how either." "That's not fair. Guilt never is." He finished the wine in one gulp. Izzy wanted to tell him he didn't have to blame himself, but she remained silent. Sometimes, silence accommodates pain better. That dawn, she woke up to a sound in the hallway. She got up and found Liam quietly crying, sitting outside his father's door. Izzy lifted him up. "Did you have a nightmare?" He nodded. "About Mommy. She went away again." Izzy held him close. "Do you want to sleep with me tonight?" He nodded without speaking. That night, they slept together, and Izzy understood she wasn't alone anymore. Neither was he. The days wove together, small folds of routine. Liam smiled again. Julian began appearing at the breakfast table. Izzy sang softly while she cooked. It was as if the house was relearning to breathe. One rainy afternoon, as Izzy read a book to Liam, Julian appeared in the living room. He stood for a while, listening. Then, he sat on the farthest armchair. Liam ran to him with a book in his hands. "Read to me, Dad." Julian hesitated. The book trembled slightly in his hands, but he read. His voice was husky. Izzy said nothing. She just closed her eyes for a moment and smiled. Because sometimes, it's in the silence that love whispers, and in the presence that it's built. The night everything changed began like so many others. Liam was asleep, in blue pajamas covered in rocket drawings, his dinosaur curled in his small arms. Izzy tucked him in gently, turned off the lamp, and stayed a moment longer at the door, watching the child's soft, steady breath. That serene sound had become, without her realizing it, the only peace she found in the early mornings. Leaving his room, she crossed the hall to the house's gallery. The moonlight bathed the wooden floors in a dull, bluish glow. It was warmer tonight, and the wind blew with an almost practiced calm. Julian was there, sitting on the long, dark wood bench, his gaze lost in the open night. "He fell asleep fast today," she said, stopping beside him. Julian turned slowly. There was something different in his look. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was a kind of presence he rarely revealed. "He likes your voice," he replied. Izzy sat down next to him. Not too close, but close enough for the silence between them to become intimate. "Did you like your wife's voice too?" she asked carefully. Julian took a long time to answer. "I liked everything about her, but I never listened to her voice as much as I should have. Sometimes we don't listen because we think we'll have time later." "Time deceives us," Izzy said, with the softness of someone speaking more about herself than about him. Julian turned toward her. The breeze moved the loose strands of Izzy's hair, and for a second, he looked at her as if he saw beyond. "Time deceives us," he said, and then added, in an almost involuntary whisper, "You scare me." Izzy looked at him surprised. "Scare you? Why? Because I bring you back to life?" She didn't have time to answer or to think of an appropriate response. Julian leaned in slowly, like someone who doesn't want to break the night's fragile spell. And then he kissed her. It wasn't urgent, nor rushed. It was a hesitant, almost sad kiss. A kiss full of accumulated pain and contained tenderness, as if he was asking for forgiveness before touching her mouth. Izzy didn't resist. It was no time for resistance. She closed her eyes and let the moment happen, completely, without defenses. But like everything rare and true, it didn't last. The next morning, Julian didn't appear for breakfast or lunch. That night, he left before Liam fell asleep. Izzy felt the emptiness like a discreet cut. She didn't confront him. She didn't seek explanations. She just noticed it and carried on. With each passing day, his distance became a planned absence. He avoided the places where she was, walked quickly past her in the hallway, and replied only with a dry gesture. Izzy didn't beg or complain. She was 8 months pregnant, her body tired, her feet swollen. But her soul was lucid. She knew it wasn't rejection. It was fear. And fear she knew well. The fear of loving again and losing again. The fear that joy was only an announcement of the next tragedy. But she was tired of running. One night, after putting Liam to bed, she found Julian in the backyard garden. He was watering the violets that had begun to bloom timidly. Izzy stopped by the low fence. "I never imagined you tending flowers." Julian didn't answer right away. He kept watering, as if searching for words that didn't yet exist. "They were her favorites," he murmured. "I know." The silence fell between them, different now. Not awkward, but charged with a truth about to emerge. Izzy moved a little closer. "Do you regret it? The kiss?" She nodded. He took his time answering. "No, I regret everything I felt after. That I liked it. That I missed her. That I was afraid." Izzy took a deep breath. "Julian, I didn't come here to be what she was, nor to occupy a place that doesn't belong to me. But I also won't apologize for being here, for feeling, for being me." Julian put the watering can down. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to me?" "Maybe, but only if you allow it." She was tired of half-words, of spaces she couldn't occupy. She didn't want to replace anyone. She wanted to be herself, with all her scars, her past, and all the love she still held, even after the pain. Julian took a deep breath. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. When my wife died, I found a note in the car's glove compartment that was meant for me. She was going to leave me. She was going to take Liam with her. Izzy felt the ground shift beneath her feet. And why are you telling me this now? Because since you arrived, I started feeling fear again. Fear that what I love will also leave. What if it's my fault again? What if I lose you too? You. Izzy held back a sob. You won't lose me, Julian, unless you're the one who pushes me away. He looked at her like someone seeking refuge, and then, with a low voice, as if tearing out something he had kept for too long, he spoke. That car, she shouldn't have been driving it. It was meant for me. She left before I did. The car was mine. The driver had warned me that the brakes had an issue. I was going to use another one, but she took it anyway. Alone? And then the accident. No witnesses, nothing stolen, no logic. Do you think it was planned? He nodded slowly. And I think it was someone close, very close. Someone who wanted to silence me for something I discovered in the company. Contracts, bribes, maybe more. But I could never prove anything. I only have a few things saved. Izzy swallowed hard. Can you show me? Julian hesitated, then nodded. He led her to the study, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a worn folder with yellowed papers and a flash drive. No one else has seen this. Izzy took the papers. There were messages, dates, suspicious bank transfers, and phantom company invoices. It was more than she expected, more than she wanted to know. But she stood there beside him. Not because it was her duty, but because, in that instant, she understood something the documents didn't reveal. Julian didn't need to be saved. He needed someone who wouldn't run away when he took off his masks. I believe you, Julian, and I'm not going anywhere. Julian lowered his head, breathing heavily. This is dangerous. Life already is, but living hidden is much worse. The clock was approaching midnight. There were no declarations of love, no promises, only the mutual presence of two survivors and the silent choice to stay, even with fear. That night, after almost everything was said, Izzy struggled to sleep. The decision to stay didn't bring peace, but it brought solid ground. She felt a new weight in her thoughts, the kind of burden accepted not out of obligation, but out of humanity. The fear was real, and more than ever she felt vulnerable, her belly heavy, and her heart exposed. But there was truth there, and after so much pain, truth was what she needed most. The silence of the estate was thick, but Izzy felt an unsettling quality in the air, a premonition. It was past 2 a.m. when she left her room. In the hallway she heard nothing, only the deep, almost imperceptible vibration of the sleeping house. Liam was quiet. She headed toward the kitchen, but stopped. The study door was slightly ajar. A faint light flickered inside. Julian was always meticulous about the study door being locked at night. This was out of place. She approached with short, silent steps, guided by a primitive alert. And then she saw him. A hooded figure was inside the study, crouching in front of a drawer. The movements were quick, nervous. Papers were scattered on the floor. Julian's notebook was open, the screen reflecting numbers. Izzy froze in the hallway. Before she could decide whether to scream or run, the floorboard creaked beneath her feet. The figure stopped and turned toward her. Izzy didn't see the face, only the metallic gleam of a gun barrel. She tried to run, to turn away, but the sound came first. The muffled crack of the gunshot shattered the silence. She felt the impact in the left side of her abdomen. A strange heat, a pain that didn't scream, only paralyzed her. Her body slammed against the wall and then slid to the floor. Her breathing became shallow. The taste of blood rose in her mouth. Her vision began to waver. She heard running footsteps, the sound of a side door being forced open. The intruder escaped into the darkness carrying something. She couldn't tell what. Izzy tried to scream but couldn't. She only whispered the name that came first to mind. Liam. And then everything went dark. Julian woke instantly to the sound. A muffled bang. Something unnatural from downstairs. He leaped out of bed, heart racing. He grabbed the gun from the bedside table drawer and ran through the dark hallways. He found the study door wide open and papers strewn across the floor. But what he saw in the hallway paralyzed him. Isabel, fallen, her face pale, the floor already stained red. No, 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 no. He ran to her. He knelt. Izzy, listen to me. She didn't respond, but she was still breathing. Weakly, almost imperceptibly. Julian pressed the wound with a trembling hand, while with the other he dialed emergency services. It was a gunshot. I need an ambulance. She's pregnant. She's pregnant. You have to come fast. The time between the call and the arrival of the medical team was a blur. Julian grabbed Liam, still groggy, and handed him to Sophia, the cook, who arrived terrified by the commotion. Stay with him. Don't tell him anything yet. Just watch him. I'll be back. The ambulance arrived. The wound was severe. The shot grazed the uterus, and her blood pressure was plummeting. She needs an urgent C-section. She's losing too much blood. Julian climbed into the ambulance with her, clutching her hand, as if that were enough to keep her from leaving. Stay with me. Stay, Izzy. You won't leave. You can't. But she no longer responded. The C-section lasted little more than 30 minutes. The baby's cry echoed in the room like a siren of hope. It was a girl, small, fragile, but alive. Isabel, however, did not open her eyes. The medical team stabilized her, controlled the hemorrhage, and intubated her. The diagnosis was clear. Medically induced coma. Severe trauma. Possible, yet uncertain, long-term effects. Julian saw it all from the observation room. His hands shook. His hardened face hid internal chaos. But his eyes told the whole story. He didn't cry. But there was a desperate containment in how he paced, how he pressed his fingers to his forehead, how he cursed softly, as if that could turn back time. She was fine. She was fine, he muttered. Just one more night. Just one more. The next day, Isabel was still unconscious. Julian spent the day at the hospital. Liam stayed with Maya, who had come from the city to help. The baby, temporarily named Amelia, a name Izzy had once whispered between talks about the future and hope, was in the incubator, healthy, strong. A miracle. The police were called. The crime scene was isolated. Julian returned to the estate with the investigators. He showed them the study, the papers that remained, but the folder containing the fraud documents had disappeared. The cameras? One of the agents asked. Julian went to the security center. The system was off. No recordings from 2 days prior. This was sabotage. Someone knew what to look for and where. The agents took fingerprints. Only one, besides Julian's and Isabel's, appeared on the hallway railing. It was partial, but clear. It was sent for analysis. Julian returned to the hospital that night. He sat next to Isabel, holding her hand, with the delicacy of someone holding something sacred. I should have protected you. His voice cracked. He closed his eyes tightly. I let someone get close again. And now, you're like this. He took a deep breath. The baby is fine. I saw her. She's so small. She has your hands. I think she's going to keep your name. You don't mind, do you? Silence. Izzy, you can't leave me when things are finally good. Not now. He rested his head on the edge of the bed and stayed there for hours, praying for the first time in years. Not for a miracle, but for her. The next morning broke clean and blue after days of rain. Julian woke to the sound of his daughter crying from the hallway. The nurse brought her in for a brief, symbolic visit. He took her in his arms, arranging the blankets, and approached Isabel's bed. "Look who came to see you. She's getting beautiful, just like you." He sat in the armchair, about to start another of those long, one-sided conversations, when he felt it. A slight movement, almost imperceptible. Her hand contracted under his. Julian froze. "Izzy?" Her breathing hadn't changed, but her fingers moved again. He leaned in, his eyes locked on her face. "Izzy, if you're there, squeeze my hand." Silence, and then she squeezed it. Slowly, weakly, but real. Julian gasped, his eyes filling. The nurse noticed the reaction and ran to get the medical team. But Julian didn't move. He stayed there, kneeling by the bed, his daughter in his arms and his heart ablaze. Isabel's eyes fluttered, trembled. She opened her eyelids with effort. She took time to focus, but when she did, she smiled. A weak, tired, but complete smile. Julian let out a sob, the trembling laughter of someone who is about to lose everything and, against all odds, gets the impossible back. Isabel tried to speak, but couldn't. She only looked at the baby, then at him. Julian leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers, and whispered, as if it were the first day of a new life, "You're back. You survived, and I love you, Izzy, more than I've ever loved anyone." She closed her eyes again, but this time, it wasn't a coma. It was peace. That afternoon, she spoke for the first time. Her voice was weak, but there. Is she okay?" Julian smiled. "She's perfect, just like her mom." Isabel turned her face slowly. Tears rolled down her cheeks without haste. "I thought I wouldn't see her face." "You were wrong," he said, squeezing her hand. "You're stronger than you think." She looked around. The IVs, the machines, the monitors. Then her eyes returned to him. "And the man? He's in custody. He'll pay for everything to..." Everything. She absorbed the information. Then, like someone retrieving a memory, she murmured, "I heard you. Every day." Julian swallowed hard. "Then why did it take you so long?" She smiled weakly. "I needed a reason." She looked at her daughter, then at him. "Now I have two." Epilogue. A life built on truth. The hospital room air, once thick with fear, now hummed with a quiet certainty. Julian rarely left Izzy's side, holding her hand with the reverence of a man who had been given the impossible. Amelia, their daughter, was discharged from the NICU and brought into Izzy's private room. A small, tangible miracle. The new normal at the estate. Izzy's recovery was gradual but steady. 2 months after the shooting, she returned to the estate. The old house, once a silent mausoleum, was unrecognizable. Julian had thrown out all the dark, heavy furniture, letting the sunlight flood in. The walls were painted a soft cream, and Sophia, the cook, filled the house with the smell of freshly baked bread. Liam, now 6, was the bridge. He would sit by Izzy's bedside, gently placing Amelia's hand on Izzy's forehead, explaining in solemn detail how the magic baby was getting stronger. His laughter echoed through the hallways, a sound that Julian had not heard for years. The old fear was replaced by an aggressive, loving clarity. Julian worked remotely, turning his home office into the new headquarters for his realigned company. He fired all the executives who had been complicit in the corporate fraud and appointed a new team dedicated to transparency. His new empire was focused on ethical investing and small-scale, community-focused development, a complete reversal from his father's legacy. The proposal of substance. One crisp afternoon in late spring, Izzy was strong enough to sit in the garden, watching Liam and Amelia nap under the supervision of a watchful Julian. "I need to ask you something," Julian said, kneeling in the grass before her, not unlike when he first offered her the job. His hands were clean, no longer stained by the shadows of his past. Izzy smiled. "Are you going to fire me?" "I'm going to promote you," he corrected, his eyes alight. He didn't offer a ring. Instead, he handed her 2 documents. The first was the deed to the entire estate, signed over to Amelia, Liam, and Izzy. "It's a testament," he said. "The house will never be tied up in corporate drama again. It's yours. It's their safe place." The second was a small business license for the Midwife's Kitchen, Izzy's own venture. "You told me you were an OB nurse who loved to cook, but you never got the chance to open your own kitchen. This is a small space downtown. We can help single mothers get certified as birth assistants, and you can teach them how to run a kitchen on the side." "Julian," Izzy whispered, overwhelmed. "These are not rings." "No," he said, taking her hand. "The rings come when you are strong enough to walk down the aisle on your own. This is my promise of substance. My promise that I am building a future with you, not just for you. It's a foundation of trust. Will you accept this foundation, Izzy?" Tears streamed down her face. "Yes, Julian, I accept your foundation." The final picture. A year later, Izzy walked down the sun-drenched aisle in the garden, wearing a simple dress and holding a bouquet of violets, his late wife's favorite, chosen not out of replacement, but remembrance. Liam, proudly holding Amelia, watched as his father and Izzy exchanged simple vows. Julian Vance, the lonely CEO, was gone. He was replaced by a loving husband and a truly present father. He learned that the only empire worth building is one you can hold in your arms, and the only true foundation is built on love and unvarnished truth. The story is complete. From a place of profound grief, Izzy found love, safety, and a new life built on honesty. What lesson from Izzy and Julian's story do you think Julian's old business rival, Etiquette Estebao, would have benefited from the most? Share your final thoughts below.